If God is all powerful, why does he let bad things happen?
Mm. Yeah, this is a conundrum. This is one of the real wrestling points of our faith. I remember years ago, I was new to my faith. This was in the early 1990s, and I was taking a class in college, and I was an anthropology major. And so we were looking at some African cultures, and there was this culture that lived along this creek, and people were dying left and right from these parasites that came from
Mm,
the creek.
mm,
These worms would drill into people's legs in the water,
mm-hmm,
and they died these brutal deaths. And I was new to my faith, and that was a real challenge to my faith. Like,
mm-hmm.
God, why would you allow this suffering? You created these stupid worms. What the heck
Yeah.
were you thinking? And I had to really press in and wrestle with this reality of suffering, of bad things happening to good people, of death, of I mean, you can name any number of
Yes.
sufferings. I'll give a line here from the Catechism that points us in a direction, but I also want to just reverence people's sufferings. There is silence that is often needed and a reverence before people's sufferings before we start trying to give answers. I think jumping on an answer to the conundrum and mystery of suffering, it doesn't do justice to the
Mm-hmm.
reality of it. So I just want to say that and move forward in the spirit of that reverence. The Catechism says something like this. This is a paraphrase. I'm not remembering it word for word, but uh, the all powerful God would not allow any evil or suffering if he was not so all powerful to bring about even something greater, some greater good through that suffering. He manifests, again, the Catechism here, I'm paraphrasing, but the Catechism says he manifests his almighty power precisely in his ability to bring a greater good out of evil. But why does he allow it? Again, with reverence for all that we suffer. And somebody out there might be some listener out there who's going through something really, really awful. Um, but we have to talk about the reality of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Why did God give us freedom? We have freedom to do good things. We have freedom to bless people. We have freedom to do bad things. We have freedom to hurt people. And all of us wrestle internally with good and evil. Why did God give us freedom? I know I've gotten to the point in my questioning of these things where I thought, okay, God, if you didn't want me to sin, why'd you give me the freedom to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, would you just take away my ability to choose wrongly? But if if he takes away our ability to choose wrongly, then our ability to choose rightly has no meaning.
Yeah, you can spend some time just thinking on that, trying to imagine what that would be like, um, the whole world with no freedom.
Yeah,
All is instinct, sort of just must do what we have no choice in things. And how does that we're not human
yeah.
anymore.
We're no longer human, and there's
Yeah,
no possibility of love.
right.
Forgive me, but I'm thinking of a line from Braveheart. What will you do with your freedom?
Mm-hmm.
Will you fight? Freedom was given to us as the capacity to love, but we also have the flip side capacity, which is the capacity to not love. And that puts us in a battle right from the first pages of Scripture. We see this battle for freedom. What will we do with our freedom? Will we fight to learn what it means to love? And along that way, we're going to fumble, we're going to stumble, and we're going to wound other people. And it is possible to harden your heart so much that you kind of calcify that non-love and become a vengeful person, or so riddled with lust that you dominate and control other people for your
Hmm.
sexual gratification. And that wounds people terribly. And then other people have to deal with the fallout of that. I know in my own life, my brokenness, my fallen humanity has come out in a million ways that have hurt other people. And you've been the recipient of that. My children have been the recipient of that. Uh, I'm thinking of certain students who were the recipient of certain crap of my heart that I hadn't dealt with or really exposed to the Lord or sought healing. We wound people, and we have to reckon with how we really do wound people. But
Mm.
even there, the Lord promises that as we open up our wounds where we've been wounded, miracles of grace can happen. A greater good can happen. So, can you read the question again? I just want to make sure I'm
Yeah,
addressing the
yeah,
various levels, because there can be so many levels to it.
yeah. There it is. It's so true. If God is all powerful, why does He let bad things happen?
Yeah, yeah. So we're back to that God respecting our freedom,
Hmm.
right? And this came to me one time in prayer also, that we only know the bad things that God allows. We don't know the bad things He doesn't allow, because
Hmm.
He doesn't allow them.
Hmm.
So there's a limit to evil. It's not just a quote free for all.
Yeah.
He places a limit on evil. And in the end, this is one of my favorite lines, and it is consoling in an infinite way. It's like an abyss of consolation if we
Mm.
really enter into it. This line from John Paul II: the idea, this is a paraphrase, but pretty close to what JP2 says. The idea that God is love would be false if He Himself did not bear our sufferings with us. This is where we as Christians have something unique to offer the world when it comes to the question of suffering.
Hmm.
God does not promise. He allows these sufferings. He respects our freedom. Uh, and He doesn't promise that in this life He will take them away. But He does promise that He will bear these sufferings with us. And we are in deep intimacy with God in our sufferings, precisely because God Himself, in the second person of the Trinity, the Word was made flesh, Jesus Christ, bore in His body, in His mind, in His heart, in His soul, in His whole person. He bore what we suffer and transformed that suffering into glory. This is where God reveals His almighty power. This Catechism of the Catholic Church says that God's ability to bring good out of evil, God's ability to forgive sins, God's ability to transform that sin into something glorious is the ultimate manifestation of His almighty power. It's more powerful than the creation of the whole universe. What happens in the confessional, for example,
Mm.
where sin is forgiven and grace is given to transform something bad into something with the hope of glory,
Yeah.
that is more powerful than the creation of the whole universe,
Mm.
says the Catechism. That's stunning. That is a stunning manifestation of God's almighty power.
And I think we have all kinds of personal experiences where we can see our suffering led us to God.
Yes, yes,
We also can see examples of people whose suffering have led them to curse God and
yes,
led them
yes.
to hardness of heart. So we know that God can bring good out of suffering, but even there, He respects our freedom, that
Yeah,
we can still close
that's
ourselves
right.
off to that grace. And I love when you said about the mystery of suffering, because sometimes we hear this question termed the problem of evil. And problem implies there's a solution that we have to kind of work it out. And the word mystery just includes that sense of we don't fully expect to
Yes,
understand this.
yes,
But we can reflect on our own lives and the lives of others. And I know I think about you and an incredibly deep suffering that you went through in your life when your girlfriend broke up with you. And that could seem like a light thing, but
Right.
it's not a light thing.
Right.
It's devastating. It's like your life falling apart right in
Yeah.
front of you. And that's overwhelmingly difficult. And yet, how that caused an opening in your heart to God, and how many people have been at terribly low points in their lives, the deep, deep suffering, and they're suffering, and the people around them who love them are suffering. And when that is pierced by God's light and love, and it really hinges on what you said about Christ's bearing our sufferings,
Yeah.
that sense of being known in that deep, dark hole,
Yeah. Yeah.
that he knows. He's felt that. And we can find that if we enter into the scripture, if we get to know the Lord by getting to know his life and his sufferings, then we can recognize he really knows us. He's
Yes.
really
Yes.
been present
Yes.
in this very life that we're living. And so part of the mystery of suffering is the mystery of knowing Christ's presence in every aspect of our lives. And how is that possible? Because God is God, because he's all powerful, and can work wonders in our lives.
I'm reminded of a retreat I went on. Gosh, when was it? Just a couple months ago. About 8 months ago. And the retreat director, Monsignor John, you know well, Wendy, he was helping me see that a time of great suffering in my life was the Lord carving me out to have a wider capacity to receive his love.
Mm.
And he had me reflect on the scripture where Jesus, in the very act of betrayal, Judas is betraying Jesus. And Jesus says to Judas, "Friend, do what you came for." And he had me reflecting on that. And I got to the point, and he was kind of guiding me there to realize that this person who had caused me such great suffering in my life, I could say, "Friend, do what you came for." Because with looking in retrospect, you don't feel it as you're going through the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look back on it, and this is something that happened in my childhood, looking back, I can see that suffering that this person caused me really did carve me out for deep intimacy.
Mm.
And for the Lord to use that to bring me closer to him, I can say, yeah, friend, do what you came for, because what you're about to do to me is going to bring me to deep intimacy with Jesus on the cross in an agony that I don't deserve, I don't desire, but the Lord allows to bring about a greater good. Every once in a while, he just lifts a little corner of the veil for you to see the greater
That's
good
right.
that he's bringing about. And it increases our faith. And so I invite anybody out there suffering with something, ask the Lord, lift a corner of the veil, Lord, to show me the greater good. Give me a little glimpse of the greater good that you have promised to bring about here. This is what our faith teaches us. And if we can stand on that rock that is our faith, that these sufferings are bringing about a greater good, then we can truly trust, even when it seems all the evidence seems contrary to it. There's Christ hanging on the cross. My God, why have you abandoned me? But then the next line, into your hands I entrust my spirit. I know you love me. I know you love me. I entrust myself to you. And how do we know his trust was not in vain? Because he's raised in glory. That's our promise. That's where it all goes. The crucifixion is the sign of all of our sufferings, and the resurrection is the sign that all of our sufferings, if we follow him who bore them, will be transformed into glory. That's why I'm Catholic. Bottom line, because the church is the locus. It's the place where that transformation is promised. Wow.
Amen.